They say wealth is earned. They say it's built through discipline, patience, hard work. But Machiavelli would smirk at that lie, the lie sold to keep men obedient. Because the truth is this: money doesn't reward virtue, it rewards understanding. Understanding the laws that govern behavior, loyalty, fear, and illusion. You see, most people think wealth is about accumulation, about stacking coins, chasing profits, investing, saving, trading. But the Machiavellian mind doesn't see money as a number. He sees it as a signal, a living language that reveals who truly commands the world. And the first eternal law is this: money flows to structure, not to struggle. Every poor man thinks he's fighting against the system. The rich man, he is the system. While others work for stability, he designs the instability they must survive through. That's why wealth seems to concentrate, not because the rich hoard it, but because the strong architect it. They write the rules, and others play by them. Ask yourself, are you in control of your income, or is your income in control of you? Because if your money depends on a paycheck, a client, a trend, an algorithm, you don't own wealth, you rent permission. Permission to exist in a structure you didn't build. Machiavelli's mind understood something timeless. Power is not in possession, but in permission. The true master of wealth is not the one who holds it, but the one who decides who may touch it. That's why kings built kingdoms not to hoard gold, but to own the flow of it. That's why empires didn't conquer just land, they conquered trade routes, the flow. Because he who controls the flow doesn't need to chase riches. Riches chase him. So, if you want to be rich forever, you must stop acting like a consumer and start thinking like a constructor. You don't just need income. You need an ecosystem, a web where every thread pulls value toward you, whether you move or not. This is the first shift from the ordinary to the eternal. Stop thinking of wealth as effort and start thinking of it as architecture. Machiavelli would tell you, build not a business, build a dependency, because businesses fade. Dependencies feed you forever. The man who runs a shop might sell to hundreds. The man who controls what the shopkeepers buy from feeds thousands without lifting a finger. It's not about owning everything. It's about owning the necessity. When people cannot move forward without crossing your bridge, your wealth becomes infinite. That's what he meant when he said, "It is better to control one river than to swim in many." The modern mind thinks wealth is hustle. The eternal mind knows wealth is gravity. It pulls, quietly. It bends reality around its structure. You never see gravity. You only see its effects. The same with real power. But before you can build that structure, there's a truth you must confront. The world doesn't pay for work. It pays for certainty. People will give everything to what makes them feel safe. That's why even the most intelligent become servants of corporations, governments, or trends. They trade freedom for comfort, ownership for order. Machiavelli's first commandment of infinite wealth was simple. Do not chase security. Manufacture it. Build systems that make others feel safe in your orbit. Give them the illusion of stability while you design the chaos. Because the one who provides comfort in a world of confusion becomes irreplaceable. It's the same reason religions, empires, and brands last centuries. They provide psychological safety. Not always truth, not always fairness, but certainty. And certainty converts faster than logic. You want to be rich forever? Become a source of certainty in an uncertain world. Create something people cannot imagine living without, not because it's the best, but because it feels inevitable. Look at the masters of our age. They don't sell products. They sell dependency. They make tools, platforms, systems that you can't escape. They've achieved what every Machiavellian mind seeks: relevance that outlives their name. That's the hidden formula, not fast money, not visible luxury, but designed indispensability. And here's the paradox most never see. The moment you stop chasing wealth directly, and instead start constructing the environment that wealth moves through, the game flips. You stop playing. You start hosting. When you host the table, you don't worry about who eats more, because every meal passes through your kitchen. That's the quiet math of kings. But here's where most fail. They build for money, not for control. They think wealth is measured in accounts, not in influence. Yet Machiavelli warned, gold without governance is vanity. If you earn what you can't defend, you're not rich. You're a target. To be wealthy forever, you must become the frame, the invisible container that holds value together. Ask yourself, what system feeds you when you sleep? What would survive if you vanished for a year? What have you built that others rely on without realizing? Because wealth that stops when you stop working is just slavery with applause. Machiavelli would call that the illusion of prosperity, the golden leash. You may live in a mansion, but if the hands that built your fortune can be turned off by another man, you're not free. The eternal law is to build independent structures that breathe without your presence. Assets, systems, ideas, networks that operate in silence, generating value long after you've withdrawn your effort. And yet, even that is not enough, because the highest form of wealth isn't financial, it's positional. The power to influence outcomes without participation, to decide who wins, who loses, without appearing in the arena. That's the evolution, from the rich to the ruler, from participant to architect. So the first pillar of Machiavelli's eternal law is this: stop chasing money. Start designing systems that make others move for it. Let others work for comfort. You build the environment that defines it. Let others compete for attention. You own the channels that attention flows through. Because when you control the structure, time becomes irrelevant. Wealth compounds in silence. Power circulates in your absence. And the world begins to orbit around your invisible gravity. This is not the dream of the rich. It's the science of the powerful. And those who master it never retire. They never fade. Their names might vanish, but their systems live forever, generating influence, reshaping nations, and whispering through generations that never knew their face. That is the first law of eternal wealth. Every empire begins the same way, not with armies, but with a decision. The decision to own what others depend on. The first merchants owned trade routes. The first kings owned taxes. The first tycoons owned energy. The modern masters, they own attention. That's the second eternal law. Control what multiplies without you. You can't be everywhere. You can't sell every product, make every call, shake every hand. But systems can, networks can, ideas can. The rich build systems that move faster than time, while the poor build schedules that enslave them to it. Machiavelli understood this before anyone. In The Prince, he wrote, "He who relies upon chance builds his kingdom upon sand." Chance is what most call opportunity. But to the Machiavellian, opportunity means dependence. Dependence on being at the right place, the right time, with the right approval. The moment your income needs luck, you've already surrendered control. To get rich forever, you must build a machine that doesn't need you to breathe. That's the quiet paradox of freedom. You earn it by constructing systems that outlive your labor. Think of money as a river. The fool stands in it, trying to catch the flow. The strategist builds dams, channels, turbines, so that the river works for him. That's how dynasties begin. Not with hard work, but with positioning. Look around the world today. The faces may change, but the formula hasn't. The richest men don't own the gold. They own the infrastructure that transfers it. They don't chase currency. They create the environment where currency must pass through their gates. This is the second stage of Machiavellian wealth, from owning effort to owning access. Every company, every government, every empire is built on this same principle. Control access, and you control loyalty. Restrict access, and you create demand. That's why exclusivity sells. That's why scarcity manipulates. That's why people worship what they cannot easily reach. The Machiavellian doesn't flaunt wealth, he engineers distance. He creates hierarchy through selective access. Because people don't crave equality, they crave proximity to power. And proximity, in the world of money, is everything. This is why kings sat on thrones above their people, not for comfort, for psychology. Every inch of height symbolized inaccessibility. Every curtain, every gate, every ritual reminded others that power must be approached with permission. Modern rulers use the same theater: velvet ropes, private lists, exclusive tiers, verified checkmarks. They're not status symbols, they're control mechanisms. They separate the consumers from the controlled. If you want wealth that lasts forever, you must engineer perception as carefully as you engineer profit, because wealth without mystery is weakness. Transparency is comfort for the poor. Concealment is armor for the powerful. You don't show your entire empire. You let the world guess. You let them believe you have less than you do, because once they can measure you, they can plot against you. Machiavelli warned, power is not in what they see, but in what they cannot prove. So, the second eternal law: hide your architecture, display your influence. Show enough to inspire curiosity, never enough to expose your foundations. Because when people can't understand how you win, they assume you can't lose. And that illusion, the illusion of invincibility, is more profitable than any empire built on transparency. But here's where the real transformation begins. Once you control access and perception, money stops being your master. It becomes your magnet. You no longer work to make it. It begins orbiting you. That's when the Machiavellian turns his focus inward, because the greatest danger of success is the addiction it creates. Money is a mirror. The more it reflects, the more you mistake the reflection for reality. So the third law emerges: detach or be devoured. Every generation collapses under this one illusion that wealth guarantees freedom, but wealth without restraint guarantees slavery of a different kind. The kind where your possessions own you, where your lifestyle dictates your choices, where you fear losing what once made you free. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He wrote, "A prince must never become a servant of his own fortune," meaning, if your identity depends on your riches, you've already lost your crown. The strong don't chase wealth to feel powerful. They chase discipline to remain untouchable, because the moment money controls your emotions, someone else can control your decisions. The rich man fears losing his wealth. The powerful man fears nothing, because he can rebuild it. That's why true freedom doesn't come from ownership. It comes from competence. And competence isn't about what you know, it's about what you can recreate under pressure. A Machiavellian mind doesn't mourn loss. He studies it. He uses it as data, as proof of how systems bend, as a rehearsal for domination. That's how you transcend the mortal game of money. You no longer measure success by what you hold, but by what you can restore. Imagine losing everything tomorrow: your job, your investments, your reputation. Would you crumble, or would you reconstruct? That answer defines whether you're rich or whether you're eternal. Because money is replaceable, position is rebuildable, but awareness, true strategic consciousness that cannot be taken. And awareness is the hidden engine of infinite wealth. It's what separates those who make money from those who manufacture its meaning. Awareness is the ability to see patterns others ignore, to predict reactions, to sense opportunity where others feel chaos. That's why Machiavelli studied not numbers, but human nature. He didn't write about gold or trade. He wrote about manipulation, obedience, trust, because he knew money always bends to psychology. You want to get rich forever? Don't just learn how markets move, learn why people move. Because money is never the cause, it's the consequence. When you understand this, the game becomes easy. You stop fighting for every dollar. You start designing emotions, incentives, dependencies, the invisible architecture of value. Machiavelli's eternal formula can be summarized in one sentence: control perception, engineer access, and detach from dependence. Do that, and wealth becomes inevitable. Not by accident, not by luck, but by gravitational law. Because when you can disappear and the system still pays you, you've mastered finance. But when you can disappear and the system still obeys you, you've mastered power. That's the distinction most never reach. And that's why their riches fade when they do. They built income, not influence. They owned property, not psychology. Machiavelli would call that the tragedy of the modern merchant, rich in assets, poor in control. But those who understand the eternal laws don't just survive economies, they write them. And when you begin to think this way, not emotionally, but architecturally, you stop asking, how do I make more? And start asking, how do I make others move more? That's when your wealth becomes infinite, because it's not built on effort, but on awareness. And awareness, once gained, never fades. By now, you understand the first truth. Money is not earned, it is engineered. The second, power flows not to effort, but to structure. And the third, freedom does not belong to the wealthy, it belongs to the disciplined. But there is a deeper, more hidden layer to eternal wealth. One Machiavelli would whisper only to those few ready to rule, not merely survive. He would call it the law of strategic dependency. See, every empire, every corporation, every dynasty thrives on one simple equation. Control the source of comfort, and you control behavior. The rich don't enslave through chains anymore, they enslave through convenience. They make your life easy until you forget how to live without them. That's the invisible hand of modern domination. The streaming platform that owns your attention. The algorithm that decides what you see. The bank that keeps your money digital and distant. The employer who pays you just enough to silence your rebellion. Machiavelli would not call this oppression. He'd call it elegance. The ability to rule minds without ever raising your voice. Because when people's survival depends on your structure, obedience becomes instinct. The third eternal law is this: make yourself essential, not visible. The loud rich man flaunts his empire and invites envy. The silent rich man embeds himself in the bloodstream of civilization. Remove him, and the world collapses. That is eternal wealth when your existence becomes invisible infrastructure. If they can see your throne, they can plan to overthrow you. But if they cannot find where your throne even is, they must serve it forever. So how do you build this? You build through interconnection. You make yourself the unseen link that keeps systems alive. It could be technology, information, capital, influence. It doesn't matter the medium. What matters is that you become the nervous system others unknowingly depend on. Think of the spider's web. Each thread seems fragile, almost delicate, but disturb one, and the spider feels it instantly. That's the Machiavellian position, to sit at the center, untouched, while everything vibrates in your favor. But here's where most fail. They want recognition. They want applause. They crave acknowledgement, and that craving destroys empires faster than war. Because visibility invites attack. Mystery creates security. That's why the most powerful people on earth are not the ones you see on screens. They are the ones who fund them, own them, or design the systems that feed them. Machiavelli would say, be the whisper behind the throne, not the man who sits on it. The world remembers kings, but kings fall. The advisors, the quiet architects they endure. Now, to build that kind of power, you must understand one of the most dangerous truths about money. Loyalty cannot be bought, it must be conditioned. People think generosity wins loyalty, but it doesn't. It creates expectation. You give once, they call you kind. You give twice, they call you consistent. You stop giving, they call you cruel. The Machiavellian never gives for gratitude. He gives for leverage. He gives strategically. Every act of generosity must create dependency, not comfort. If someone benefits from your help but can live without it, you've wasted power. But if your help becomes their habit, you've built control. This is the invisible string law. You tie people not through chains, but through emotion, the quiet guilt of needing you. You never announce your generosity. You let them remember it in silence. And every time they act through that memory. That's how rulers maintain influence long after they've left the room. They don't command, they echo. This is why kings once gave land instead of gold. Gold disappears. Land demands loyalty. It ties a man's livelihood to the soil of his obedience. The modern version is subtler. Opportunities, access, introductions, platforms. You don't buy allegiance. You make people invested in you. Machiavelli's fourth eternal law: never own people. Own their dependence. He understood the flaw in human nature. We mistake comfort for safety and gratitude for loyalty. But true loyalty is built through fear of losing what you provide. And this is not cruelty, it's design. Because the moment people stop needing you, they start resenting you. The balance of power is never emotional, it's architectural. You want to be free forever? Then make others tie their freedom to yours. Build systems where your survival and theirs intertwine, but you hold the roots. Because the greatest fortress of wealth is not walls or vaults, it's relevance. As long as you are relevant, you are safe. The moment you become replaceable, you become disposable. That's why the Machiavellian never teaches the full system. He teaches just enough to make others efficient, but not independent. Because when they know everything, they no longer need him. When they know only the surface, they worship the source. That's the psychology of empires. Give the crowd comfort, never comprehension. And yet, even that structure dependency, relevance, control, is still incomplete. Because every master faces one final test. Can you let go without losing power? Most can't. They cling. They hoard. They overextend. They fear the silence that follows influence. But the Machiavellian sees silence as proof of mastery. He designs systems that speak for him. He creates movements that move without his hand. He builds ideas that operate like engines, self-reinforcing, self-sustaining, self-replicating. That's how you outlive yourself. That's how you become eternal. Because what is wealth if it dies when you do? What is power if it vanishes with your presence? The goal isn't to get rich. The goal is to create architecture that never ends. That's why old families, ancient orders, hidden institutions still rule the modern world, not through bloodlines, but through structures. Laws, corporations, foundations, ideologies, they've turned their influence into systems that no revolution can erase. Machiavelli's fifth eternal law captures it perfectly. The wise man invests not in gold, but in continuity. Gold can be stolen, continuity cannot. And that is the silent game of the immortals, to hide their power in plain sight, to build webs that stretch across generations, to make their name irrelevant, but their influence permanent. They don't chase legacy. They encode it. And that's where most people fail. They want recognition, not replacement. They want fame, not structure. They want the world to know they're rich, instead of building a world that stays rich for them. Machiavelli would laugh at this era, the age of the visible rich. He'd call them entertainers, not rulers, because real rulers aren't recognized, they're referenced. Their names become systems, their absence becomes fear, their silence becomes control. That's the difference between success and sovereignty. Success needs applause. Sovereignty creates it. So, if you seek the hidden formula to get rich forever, stop asking, how can I make more? And start asking, what can't they live without that I can quietly own? The first question makes you a merchant. The second makes you a Machiavellian. Power, wealth, control, they all share the same flaw, the illusion of permanence. Every empire that believed itself eternal eventually fell, not because of enemies, but because of comfort. Comfort breeds blindness. It whispers to the ruler that the system will always work. It tells the rich that the flow of gold will never dry. It tells the powerful that obedience will never fade. And so, they stop watching the edges. They stop adapting. They stop fearing. That's how immortals die in comfort, not in battle. Machiavelli's final law is not about dominance, but about evolution. He called it the art of vanishing without disappearing. To stay rich forever, you must master the ability to shed your skin before the world demands it. When the world starts to understand your methods, change the method. When your strategy becomes predictable, destroy it. When they think they've learned your pattern, build a new language they can't yet speak. Most men crave stability. The Machiavellian craves fluidity, because the moment the world can define you, it can defeat you. Money is a mirror, power is a pulse. Both decay when they stop moving. So the sixth eternal law, stay undefined. Never let the market, the people, or your enemies understand where your edges are. Be the fog, not the fortress. The fortress can be attacked. The fog can only be feared. Think about the true dynasties, the ones that never die, only transform. They start as merchants, then become bankers, then become nations. Their influence doesn't disappear, it metamorphoses. That is the hidden formula to eternal wealth. Never end, only evolve. When others chase money, you chase motion, because in motion lies immortality. The fool works to protect what he built. The strategist works to build what protects him. That's why Machiavelli's most misunderstood lesson isn't about manipulation, it's about anticipation. He didn't just study how men behave, he studied how they will behave when threatened, rewarded, ignored. He knew that foresight is the highest form of wealth, because when you can predict reaction, you own the result. The seventh eternal law: never respond, always provoke. Those who react are already enslaved by the tempo of others. But those who provoke, who set the rhythm, become conductors of chaos. That's what the modern world misunderstands. They think power means domination. It doesn't. Power means direction. To quietly steer the collective will toward your chosen outcome, without resistance, without force. That's the ultimate freedom, to let others think they've chosen when they've only followed. And this brings us to the final tier of Machiavellian mastery: detachment from the material. Not rejection, not renunciation, transcendence. Because even control can become a prison if you need it to feel powerful. The moment you define yourself by ownership, you are owned. The moment you measure yourself by wealth, you are measured. To get rich forever, you must reach a point where you can walk away from everything and remain the cause behind it all. Machiavelli wrote, "He who can walk away and still be obeyed is truly the master." Imagine that. Imagine disappearing from the empire you built, yet its structure still bows to your will. Imagine not needing the money, yet it still flows toward your name. Imagine not chasing legacy, yet your influence infects centuries. That is not wealth, that is divinity disguised as strategy. And to reach it, you must pass through 3 trials. Trial 1, the death of desire. You must learn to act without craving, to pursue without needing, to work as if the reward is inevitable, not negotiable, because the moment you need an outcome, you become predictable. And predictability is death to a Machiavellian. Trial 2, the silence of recognition. You must become comfortable with invisibility. You must let others take credit while you take control. Because credit is noise, control is structure. The one who controls has no need to speak, only to design. Trial 3, the rebirth of purpose. Once you've mastered the game, you must redefine why you play. Because endless accumulation without direction becomes decay. The Machiavellian doesn't hoard, he constructs meaning. He turns wealth into movement, power into art, control into architecture. That's why the eternal few, the ones who live through eras, are not remembered for what they owned, but for what they orchestrated. They didn't simply collect money, they choreographed civilization. And that's what you must become: a choreographer of consequence. Because the world will always chase riches, they will always desire more, spend more, fear more. But you, if you truly want to get rich forever, must step outside that loop. You must see money not as currency, but as current, a force that flows through those who understand direction. Every dollar you earn should serve a geometric purpose to multiply influence, not indulgence. Every opportunity you accept should build infrastructure, not ego. Every person you empower should strengthen the system, not the spotlight. Because eternity is not a timeline, it's a network. You are not remembered by how long you lived, but by how long your design endures. That's the hidden formula Machiavelli left buried in his writings. Wealth is not measured in gold, but in gravity. How much does your presence bend the world around you? How much does your absence echo when you're gone? If the world still moves in your direction long after you've vanished, then you've achieved the ultimate state: invisible dominion. That's the end game of every strategist, every ruler, every architect of power. To exist everywhere and nowhere, to influence without identity, to command without words. And so, the final eternal law: disappear from the game, but let the game play your design. That is how kings become myths. That is how the rich become empires. That is how mortals become eternal. You don't get rich forever by owning money. You get rich forever by owning meaning. You get rich forever by turning your life into a structure that others unknowingly maintain. You get rich forever when you can vanish and the world still pays tribute to your design. Machiavelli understood that power is never about what you touch. It's about what moves when you don't. So when you walk away from this, remember, the formula is simple, but the discipline is rare. Control access, control perception, control dependence, control motion, control meaning. Do this, and you will never just be rich, you will be permanent. And permanence is the only true currency. Because the rich spend money, the powerful spend time, but the eternal, they spend reality.